They got us. They fooled us. Well, they fooled the leakers or the reporters. No March event. It's happening in April. Let me tell you about it. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Greg here, and we just got a ton of information regarding the next iPad Pro that adds even more information to my last video I did not too long ago covering all aspects of the 2021 iPad Pro. So hopefully you're not burned out from iPad news, because we do have a lot of information here that I think is interesting enough for an updated video. And we also have some more confirmation of an iPad mini and slimmer, cheaper iPad coming sometime soon, as well as Apple moving, or I guess not moving, but taking their usual March event and having that in April. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. First of all, let's actually talk about this April event before we talk about the iPad Pro. Now, most of the rumors were saying that Apple would have an event on March 23rd. Sources like John Processor, Kang, Love to Dream, all seem to indicate that an event was going to be happening on that date. And then on Tuesday, the usual Apple press invites would normally go out at that time, and they didn't. And yeah, it looks like we're not getting that March 23rd event. But fear not, we don't have to wait too long for the actual event or product releases to take place, because again, John Prosser, even though he got it wrong the first time, is saying that an event will actually take place in April, not March, according to one of his more trusted sources. And I kind of believe this because yesterday we got a new report from Mark Gurman at Bloomberg saying that Apple is readying a release of the new iPad Pro in April. Gurman and Prosser kind of butt heads sometimes, so with them both saying April, I gotta take this as being accurate. So yeah, long story short, March event is going to be an April event this year, which is pretty abnormal, but hey, at least we don't have to wait too much longer. Hopefully we don't have to wait too much longer. I want new iPads. Speaking of iPads, in that Gurman report, he says a lot more than that the iPad is just coming in April. He also details a bunch of information about these new iPad Pros, confirming some of the earlier reporting that I've told you about in previous videos, and detailing some brand new features that I haven't seen mentioned anywhere else. For starters, Gurman is confirming that there will be an 11 and 12.9-inch iPad Pro. For a while, we weren't sure if Apple would actually be launching an 11-inch version of the iPad Pro this time around, because of all the rumors we heard going into this were leaks about the 12.9-inch version, and that the 12.9-inch version would have a mini LED display. Now, I talked about mini LED so much in my last video, but just to give you a refresher, this is a new display technology that uses smaller LEDs to control the backlighting of the display. Because it's smaller and can be turned on or off in smaller zones, mini LED displays will have higher brightness and better contrast ratios and deeper black levels, which Gurman confirms as being the main benefits to this display technology. Mini LED will be a big visual upgrade to the iPad Pro's display. I think the biggest since the introduction of the Retina display on the iPad 3. However, the reason why we weren't hearing too much about that smaller 11-inch iPad Pro is because although that one is getting refreshed, there will be an update for it. Gurman is corroborating earlier reports that the mini LED display, one of the biggest new features to the iPad Pro, is going to be exclusive to the bigger 12.9-inch version, which is just really disappointing to me, because I know a lot of you out there are fans of the smaller iPad Pro, and the fact that that version will be missing what I think will be one of the bigger reasons to upgrade to this next iPad Pro means that it looks like the 12.9-inch version is the one to get this year. And if this report is true, I'll definitely be going for the bigger iPad Pro myself. Gurman also talks about the next chip that's destined for the iPad Pros. Both models will of course be receiving Apple's A14X processor, and in this Bloomberg report, we get some more confirmation that this processor will literally be on par with the M1 chip. So before, we weren't too sure if the A14X would be slightly weaker than the M1, but according to Gurman, it's basically the same chip. And we're looking at the same performance here as Apple's M1 MacBook Air. So the performance here is just going to be insane for an iPad Pro. We're talking about CPU power here that is faster than Apple's 16-inch MacBook Pro, all in a thin and light 1-pound tablet. It's interesting because before the M1 chip, the iPad Pro was already outscoring some of Apple's lower-end laptops. And a lot of us were just waiting for the day when Apple would stick their iPad chips inside of their Mac laptops. Now that day has basically come, and for the first time, we're going to be seeing an iPad Pro and a MacBook Air or MacBook Pro basically competing on equal footing here, meaning that the device you choose, whether it's the iPad Pro or the Mac, all comes down to form factor and operating systems at this point. And that's going to be a really interesting conversation to have with all of you once this new device comes out. Like, do you get an iPad Pro or a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro when they're going to be performing the same? I can't wait to have that discussion. Now listen, a lot of this information is just confirmation of earlier rumors that I've detailed on the channel before. It's nice to have reporting from Gurman though, who usually has an excellent track record, and for those of you planning your purchases, I think this information sounds pretty solid based on all the other leaks and rumors we've had throughout the year. Now I said there was one new bit of information in this report that I have yet to hear anywhere else, and that is that the next version of the iPad Pro will actually come with a Thunderbolt connector rather than just a USB-C connector. Now, technically, these are the same connector port, so old USB-C accessories, cables, and chargers should still work the same. And Gurman even says that in this report. However, Thunderbolt is much faster than the current USB-C port, which is 10 gigabits per second, and that is currently found on the current iPad Pro. The new iPad Pro will have a Thunderbolt port allowing for 40 gigabit per second connections, and it means that these new iPad Pros will be compatible with Thunderbolt accessories as well, which take advantage of this higher data throughput. For example, the monitor I use is an older version of the LG Ultrafine 5K display, and that only works with devices with a Thunderbolt connection. And if I try and plug the current iPad Pro into this display, it just doesn't work. So theoretically, with this new iPad Pro now supporting Thunderbolt, I'll be able to use this display with my iPad, or the Thunderbolt dock as well, which has a ton of connections, and it should be able to hook directly into my iPad Pro. It almost makes me wonder if Apple has any plans for some sort of iPad Pro dock, or maybe some future external monitor they're working on that can take advantage of the iPad's Thunderbolt port, because allowing you to hook into a pretty extensive docking station with just one cable, or a monitor docking station, I think that would be a pretty compelling feature for a total iPad Pro workstation. Now, I saved the least exciting part about this iPad Pro update for last, and that is that Gurman says that the new iPad Pros will have improved cameras. For most people, the rear-end camera on their iPad Pro, especially that bigger 12.9-inch version, is probably one of the features they really don't care all too much about. I have nothing, for the record, I have nothing against iPad photography. Use the tools you have at your disposal. But at this point, I think the phone you have in your pocket probably takes better photos than any of the iPads. And honestly, it's just a less awkward experience when you're using it in public. But I guess if your iPad Pro has the best camera you have, I mean, there's nothing wrong with using it. I mean, people are walking around with giant cinema cameras, so I mean, how can we complain? Okay, there's two other little tidbits in this report I wanted to share with you. First off, Gurman has a line in this report about a new iPad mini coming sometime this year with a larger display size. We've heard about the iPad mini in the past, but I believe this is the first time Gurman has mentioned it in one of his reports. So that's just even more confirmation out there that Apple is working on a new iPad mini and an iPad mini with a larger display. Hopefully it's the reduced bezeled iPad mini that looks like the new iPad Air, because I would just be excited for a device that looks like that. A completely redesigned iPad mini, sign me up. Secondly, Gurman also says that Apple is planning a cheaper iPad aimed at students with a thinner and lighter design that will be also announced later this year. Now, if I had to guess, I'm pretty sure this is going to be that $329 iPad updated to the old 10.5-inch iPad Air design. So thinner, probably a laminated display, an A13 or A14 processor depending on when it's launched, but probably still supporting older accessories like the first Smart Connector and first generation Apple Pencil, and still having a Lightning port. And hopefully, because it is based off that 10.5-inch iPad Air, hopefully it comes with 64 gigabytes of base storage, which at that price point of $329, I think that would basically continue that iPad streak as one of the best values in tech. All right, so yeah, a pretty interesting week in the Apple rumor mill, full of twists and turns and unexpected events. But that is the best information I have for you right now, and that is that we should be hearing a lot more about this iPad Pro sometime in April. But anyway, hopefully you liked this video. If you did, please leave me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. Also, be sure to let me know what you think about these latest iPad Pro rumors and this rumored Apple April event. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone. Apple April event. Apple April event. It's not that hard to say. Apple April event. Apple April event. Apple April event. Yeah, nailed it.